Hello, my name is Tamara Gibbs, and I'd like to share with you today the tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter. This is the original and authorized edition with new color reproductions, and it's published by F. Warning Company. Once upon a time there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a very big fir tree. Here we see the mother with 1, 2, 3, 4 little bunnies. "Now, my dear," said old Mrs. Rabbit one morning, "you may go into the field or down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put in a pie by Mrs. McGregor. Now run along and don't get into mischief. I'm going out." And here Mrs. Rabbit sends her bunnies out, and she takes extra care to fasten Peter in his little jacket. Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the wood to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Here we see her going through the wood. She must really love her bunnies to take such good care of them. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. Here we see them gathering blackberries with their baskets full of berries. And the blackbirds want to help eat the berries. You know, I think I might want to help eat those berries too. They look rather delicious, but we'd have to help pick them. It's not nice to not help. But Peter, who was rather naughty, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed under the gate. My, his mother told him not to do that. That wasn't very wise, was it? Let's find out what happens. First he ate some lettuces, and then some French beans, and then he ate some radishes. My, look at all that food he's eating. He's going to get sick. And then, feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley. I knew he was going to get sick. Look at him rub his tummy. He's got to go find parsley to help heal his tummy. But round the end of the cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Oh my goodness, he ran into Mr. McGregor, and you know what? I think Mr. McGregor sees him. Let's find out. Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting out young cabbages, but he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out, "Stop, thief! Oh my goodness, Peter, better run quick!" Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, for he'd forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages and the other shoe amongst the potatoes. Here we see in the picture his little shoe with a bird. Birdie knows where his shoe is, but Peter doesn't have time to get it. After losing them, he ran on 4 legs and went faster so that I think he might get away altogether if he had not unfortunately run into the gooseberry net and got caught by the large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons, and it was quite new. Oh my goodness, look at poor Peter. He's caught in a net. His mother told him not to do that. What's he going to do? Let's find out what happens. Peter gave himself up for lost and shed big tears, but his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows, who flew to him in a great excitement and implored him to exert himself. Those are some pretty big words. What do you think that means, to implore him to exert himself? That means that they told Peter not to give up. Come on, Peter, you can do it. Let's see if Peter can do it. Mr. McGregor came upon with a sieve, which he intended to pop upon the top of Peter. But Peter wiggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him. Peter got away. Yay for Peter! Let's find out what happens next. And Peter rushed into the tool shed and jumped into a can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it had not had so much water in it. Splash! We can see the water drops flying everywhere. My goodness, that couldn't have been too comfortable. Let's find out what happens next. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden under some flower pots. Here we see Mr. McGregor. He began to turn them over carefully, looking under each one. Here's Peter rubbing a can. Presently Peter sneezed. Kerchoo! And Mr. McGregor was after him in no time. And he tried to put his foot upon Peter, who jumped out the window, upsetting 3 plants. And the window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired of running after Peter. And he went back to work. My goodness, Peter got lucky, didn't he? He made such a mess. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright. He had not the least idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp with sitting in that can. After a time he began to wander about, going lippity, not very fast, looking all around. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked. There was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. He did eat too much, didn't he? An old mouse was running in and out over the stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans to her family in the wood. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not answer. She only shook her head at him. Peter began to cry. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Presently he came to a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his water cans. A white cat was staring at some goldfish. She sat very, very still, but now and then the tip of her tail would twitch, as if it were alive. Peter thought it best to go away without speaking to her. He had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. My goodness, Peter was probably pretty wise to listen to his cousin. He went back towards the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the noise of a hoe. Scritch, scratch, scratch, scritch. Peter scuttered underneath some bushes, but presently nothing happened. He came out and climbed upon a wheelbarrow, and Peter peeped over. What do you think the first thing might have been that he saw? First thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned towards Peter, and beyond him, the gate. Here we have Peter in the wheelbarrow. Here we have the garden, and Mr. McGregor hoeing the onions. And right behind him we see the gate, and Peter has to go all the way past Mr. McGregor to the gate. Let's see if Peter can do this. Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow. He started running as fast as he could go along a straight walk behind some blackberry bushes. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him at the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped under the gate and was safe at last in the wood outside the garden. He made it! He made it! Mr. McGregor hung the little jacket and shoes for a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds. Peter never stopped running or looked behind him until he got home to the big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped down on the nice soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fortnight. Here we see Peter's mother cooking, and poor Peter's just exhausted and collapsed on the floor. I'm sorry to say Peter was not very well during the evening. His mother put him to bed and made him some chamomile tea, and she gave him a dose of it to Peter. 1 tablespoon to be taken at bedtime. Here we see Mrs. Rabbit making the tea with Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail watching. And Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread, milk, and blackberries for supper. The end. In the back inside cover, we see some creatures reading. They love to read. And they're reading Two Bad Mice, J. Fisher, Flopsy Bunnies, Benjamin Bunny, Jemima Puddle Duck, Tiggy Winkle, Mrs. Tittlemouse, Squirrel Nutkin, Peter Rabbit, Tom Kitten, and the Tailor of Gloucester. And these creatures and other stories by Beatrix Potter can be found in your library. Thank you for spending this time with me, and happy reading.